Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. Each week, we address issues of timely and timeless concern with newsmakers and the journalists who report on them, with artists, scientists, educators, social scientists, and government leaders. We meet each one to one. I'm delighted to welcome the multi-talented and multitasking Vinie Burrows to the program. Actor, writer, director, producer, activist, she's a force to be reckoned with. We'll discuss her career, her commitment to her art, and to her community. Welcome.
I feel very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Vinie, I just had the pleasure of coming to see you perform in a new federal theater production of The River Crosses Rivers, which is a group of seven plays, each of them by African-American woman author. And you were in one of those plays, Hot Methuselah.
Yes, by J.E. Franklin.
Okay.
Who is the really renowned author of Black Girl.
Okay. How long have you been acting?
All my life. My mother was a member of the International Garment Ladies Workers Union, ILGWU, and as a result, there were classes for the children of union members. And I was in some little drama class, and because of that, I became a child actress on radio. Mm-hmm. So I was on NYC, I was on Let's Pretend, I was on Uncle Don on WOR.
Starting when you were 3?
Well, no, I was about probably 7 or 8.
Okay. Okay. Oh, one of the things that the unions did, and to a certain extent they still do, is to bring cultural activities to their members, and it sounds like, and to their families. It sounds like that's what they were doing.
And they're still doing it.
Right.
I know that I've been invited to address some seniors who have retired and they're interested in theater, and they invite different, personalities to address them.
Now, I understand you started your stage career as a child playing with the great actress Helen Hayes in a play directed by Josh Logan. How did that come about?
By chance. I was in school, actually in high school, and someone came around and said they're looking for a 15-year-old girl to play in a Broadway show. Why don't you go? An audition. And I went, and there were about 100 women there, young women there. And I thought Broadway, I had to have a fur coat. So I took my mother's fur coat. She had a nutria coat, and I went to this audition. And then maybe 3 months later, I was called back for another audition. And afterwards, someone came up to me and said, Miss Hayes likes you, and the director likes you, and we want you to be in the play with her.
Which was the Wisteria Trees. Now, what was the part?
It was the part of the upstairs maid, and I was playing opposite Ossie Davis. It's an adaptation of The Cherry Orchard by Chekhov.
Okay.
So instead of the Russian aristocracy, it was the Southern aristocracy, and the servants, of course, were African American.
Right. Now, you grew up in Harlem. Your mother worked with the Ladies Garment Workers Union. What did your father do?
My father was dead.
Was a dentist?
He's dead. But how did you know he was a dentist? How did you know that?
I thought that's what you said. No.
Oh, I never said that.
Okay.
But he went to dental school, and actually while he was in school, he was working for a dentist, and he would have, after the dentist left the office, he would have his own clients come in.
Okay.
And one day, or one evening, the dentist came in and said, I never have anybody working for me that's smarter than me. And he fired him.
Really?
And that was the end, because my father then had to get another job, and he had to leave dental school.
Okay.
But I still have some of his books. And he went to school before NYU acquired the New York Dental College.
Mm-hmm. So were your parents active in the theater at all?
Oh, no. My mother, it took her many, many years to get used to the idea that I was in the theater. She wanted me to go to law school. She once said, actually, she said, you see, when Dinkins was president, she said, you see what you could have done if you just stayed with the law.
Well, I think what you did was better. So what was it that compelled you towards the theater? obviously there was something, it wasn't what your parents wanted for you, it was what you wanted, obviously.
I think that there are many reasons, and the reasons why people go into different fields. I think a young African American child growing up in Harlem with a sense, who knows, Margaret Walker talked about powerlessness, a feeling of powerlessness.
Right.
Maybe it was a way of leaving the world that I was in and going into the world of imagination,
Okay.
the world of books, the world of theater, to portray other people's lives.
Right.
Well, that may be the beginning of it, but what happens when you become involved in a craft or an art form, and the question of technique and craft and how do you better yourself, how do you learn more, then that takes over.
Okay.
But the beginning origins, I'm certain, it was a way to get away from Central Harlem, from the life that I saw around me, into what I thought was a broader world.
And what period of time are we talking? Are we talking about the 40s, or what period of time are we talking about?
We're talking about the late 40s,
Okay.
early 50s.
Okay. Do you remember your first live theater performance that you saw?
Interesting. The first performance I saw was in a church, and it seems it was Salem AME Methodist Church in Harlem. And I remember being struck by being taken into another world. Except, that's true, when I was in high school, they had artists come to the school. And I saw a woman doing a one-woman show, and she was once an old lady, and she was once a teenage girl, and I was really mesmerized. So I think that was the initial impulse.
Who were your role models for the theater? Did you have any?
They were the women that I read about, Mrs. Fisk, Campbell, Bernhardt. Then I saw a picture of an African American woman, and they said she was an actress, and I was struck by her. Just her picture was similar to the feeling that I got when I read about Sarah Bernhardt, when I read about Mrs. Fisk, when I read about the other greats. She had the same force. I mean, it came out at me.
Right.
Discovered later she was Rose McClendon, and eventually I wrote a play about her.
Tell me about Rose McClendon. I don't think a lot of people probably don't know about her.
Well, she was a woman who had 16 Broadway shows. Langston Hughes wrote a play just for her called Mulatto, because he said in her short life on the Broadway stage, she'd never had a role that was worthy of her talents. She was Serena in Porgy before it morphed into Porgy and Bess. She eclipsed both Helen Hayes and Katharine Cornell in the New York World Telegram Actress of the Year for one of her roles. She was in 3 roles by Paul Green. She was in the group theater production of, The House of Connolly. Interesting about that, they rehearsed, because Fran Chartone was in that, and they rehearsed it somewhere upstate in Connecticut, and then they made the plans for the group theater. Rose McClendon was never invited to be in the group theater, and she used to watch their deliberations from her room in the hotel.
Well, when I think about people like Rose McClendon, when I think about, and one of the plays in The River Crosses Rivers was written by Ruby Dee.
Oh, yes.
And I think about black actors from an earlier era when there was so much segregation and not a whole lot of work for you in the legitimate theater, and yet how many of you persevered and some of you are still at it. And I think I remember reading about how Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee in their early years decided we're going to have to create our own work, and so we will write our own shows and we'll take them around to a lot of them went around to black colleges, and that was the way you got an audience, and that was how you made a living. Did you do that?
I did a very similar thing. I was actually, and the idea for that came to me when I was in Berlin, just before the wall went up. The American Theater wing gathered together several artists, really big artists, Martha Graham, Eileen Farrell, Thornton Wilder, and a series, and I was in a play with Ethel Waters, and that was brought over. There was a short opera, etc., etc. And we were in Berlin. I was in the play. I was performing before an all-German audience, and I got a hand once I left the stage. And I was very excited by that. I shared a dressing room with Lillian Gish, and I came in and I said to her, I'm giving up the theater. My mother wanted me to be a lawyer, and that's what I'm going to do. I said that I have to come so far, more than 2,000 miles, to perform a play which was not a D's, Dem, and Doe's role. And she said, she had no sympathy for me. She said, well, she said, you're a good actress, you just have to find a way to use your talents. And that's when the idea for a one-woman show came to me.
And what was the show?
The first show that I did was called Female of the Species, and there were 9 women, from Alice in Wonderland to Juliet, and Irish Woman, Oscar Wilde, and then ending with a poem by Langston Hughes. And well, that wasn't very successful. I mean, I would take it out to schools, I did theaters, I did prisons, I was at the Jefferson, I think it was on Jefferson Market. There was a prison there for women. I did it there. But people were not interested in seeing a black actress, no matter how bravura, do classic roles. They really weren't. So then I got pregnant, so I did Lady in Waiting, which was all about pregnant women. And then I was not pregnant anymore. I still was looking for something to do. The Vietnam War was on, and the vicar of St. Clement's, which is now turned into a theater house, said to me, why don't you, we would love to have you perform for us. And I said, well, I'll do, I had a play about anti-war places. We have lots of that with our constituency, but we know very little about the Negro experience. I said, well, all right, I will assemble.
I know a lot about that, right?
I'll assemble a play, and that was the genesis for Walk Together Children.
Okay.
And I did it there, and wherever I would do it, I would get a good response. So I went to my friend Mike Tolan and the black actor, and I said, I'm going to produce my own show off Broadway. And equity says that I have to put up a bond, and I don't have $2,500. Will you lend me $2,500? I'll give it to you immediately after the show opens. Right. Well, they did, Mike Tolan and Bobby. I can't remember his last name. And so they did. And then I opened on November the 11th, and there were 12 theater reviewers there, including Clive Barnes. Then we had 12 New York theater critics.
Right.
I mean, the Brooklyn Eagle, the Christian Science
Whole
Monitor,
different
all
time.
of them.
Right.
And so the next day, the phones were off the hook. People wanted to see.
And that was Walk Together Children?
That was Walk Together Children.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more with Vinie Burrows right after the following messages.
Take out meals for just $12.99. Call them.
Sherry Pearson. You are the sole surviving heir of the King of Montanopolis, and you are now worth $45 million.
I'm rich! This can't be real.
Of course it's not real. Come on. Having money isn't about luck. Like that takeout meal. Cook at home instead, you can save thousands a year. Feed me.
Feed the pig.
Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy, talking with the actress Vinie Burrows. You talk about your play, Walk Together Children, which is a one-woman play. You created over time 8 one-woman plays, correct? And how did you raise the money to put them on? Did you make money? Did you have to do other jobs other than acting?
Well, I discovered that once I was on the Today Show with Walk Together Children, that I was really had middle management skills, which is what I think all mothers are. We're really middle management. And when college presidents would call to say, we saw you on television, we want to bring you to our school, I could answer letters, I could answer telegrams, I could answer questions, I could send out material, discovered that I could package myself.
Okay.
And that's what I did, and eventually...
Were these black colleges or a variety of colleges?
In the beginning, mainly white colleges.
Oh.
Black colleges had the Budapest String Quartet.
Okay.
They weren't into. This is... it took some time for that to happen. But eventually, black colleges and white colleges. And then when I introduced Sister Sister, my program about women, then women's studies departments were very much interested in bringing me to their schools. So between Walk Together Children, Sister Sister, my program about women around the world, the joys and the struggles, and the similarity between women, no matter where they are, on what continent they are, what they have to do, how they have to struggle, and how they have to triumph.
Right.
I then also became very much interested in Africa, so that I had a program retelling African folklore. And that was a program geared to both lower schools, elementary schools, and then also a more adult program called Dark Fire, African
So you were
Fire.
pretty much acting full-time.
Acting full-time.
Okay.
And raising my
Two children. And you also did a number of other plays on Broadway, correct?
Yes, but not as many.
Okay.
Not as many. Off-Broadway more than Broadway, because I was just really so busy working that you have to stay in the loop. I think in more recent years I have become interested, and maybe because I've become older and not the same drive to have to put children through school or to raise them, I have been looking and have been approached with off-Broadway production, so that I have done that also.
Was it difficult to combine a life in the theater with being a mother, being a wife?
Oh, of course.
But I guess that's
Of
true of any
course.
profession.
Of course, of course. And looking back, you see mistakes that you made, but I think in the end it has turned out well for me and for my children. And of course, when you have grandchildren and great-grandchildren, you have a perspective in which you can look at them and their development and growth, and can be not as nervous about how they will turn out.
Right, as you were about your own.
Yes.
I remember how vibrant black theater was in New York in the 1970s. You had the Negro Ensemble Company, performing at the St. Mark's Playhouse, and you saw great plays there, and you know, great talent and
great playwrights.
Great playwrights. Were you part of that?
In a sense, yes, and in a sense, no. I was never part of any company. I knew the players and the producers, but I was still busy, doing those 6,000 performances, which I have done around the world.
And I also remember, people like Mary Alice.
Oh, yes.
And Lynn Thigpen, who's, sadly no longer with us, who came up along the way, and what great actresses they were. And is Mary Alice still working, as far as you know? No,
she says she has retired.
Okay.
She's very much interested in theater. She has a very lively life and supporting theater, but she has given up, and I don't think she's even done film, and I don't know why.
Right.
She's a very fine talent.
Definitely. Is there more or less work for black actors these days?
Well, there's work in film and television, cable television, HBO, but and regional theater. But I still feel that as far as Broadway is concerned, you have to sing and dance if you're black.
Interesting. Very interesting. I talked about the play that you were in recently called Hot Methuselah. These were a series of 10-minute plays. Why the 10-minute play?
It's a new genre.
Okay.
Which is catching on, these plays that you saw were very complete. I mean, they have a beginning, a middle, and end. They have a variety of subjects. They were women of color playwrights. Some of them were written by South Asian women, so it And it's interesting that it was designated short plays by women of color playwrights. So that's embracing the Latina, and it's embracing the Asian playwrights of color.
Tell me about the character you played.
Well, she was a romp. She was a woman on the other side of 65 with a philandering husband and a circumspect son. And she got tired of her philandering husband, and she got tired, in a sense, of her circumspect son who wanted her to be a certain way. But it was a great romp, and audiences enjoyed it, and I loved it also.
When you look at these short plays, are they sort of the theater's version of short stories as compared to the novel?
Oh, that's a very interesting observation. And I don't know whether I'm really qualified. I've thought long enough to really make that comparison, and I'm sure there are, because they do have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
But it is a short. Yeah.
And they were terrific, you know,
Yeah.
all of
And
them.
all of them different.
Right,
All of them
right.
different.
Now, this was put on by Woody King's New Federal Theater, and Woody King has been producing
Oh, yes.
black-themed plays for many, many years.
The original producer was not the New Federal Theater.
Okay.
The original producer was the Ensemble Studio Theater.
Okay.
Who did it in conjunction with Elizabeth Van Dyke, who also works very closely with Woody King. Then when the show was moved, because it got such good notices and such critical acclaim from the audiences, Woody King stepped in and facilitated the move along in association with the producers of Castillo Theater. So
Okay.
we had another 3-week run in another facility.
Is there a main source of black-themed plays in the city these days? Is it Woody King? Is it some other group?
Well, Woody King is the producer of black plays. I think that the Negro Ensemble is still doing some things. There are smaller theaters in Brooklyn. There's theater in Queens. There is a theater. I think that wherever you have communities of black people, somehow or another they're going to form some sort of
Right.
drama group.
Right, right.
None of them have had the years of experience, of course, that Woody King has had.
But for somebody like Woody King, where does the money come for these productions?
It's increasingly more and more difficult to get it.
Okay. We're talking grants and...
Grants and
Okay.
even a public subsidy.
Okay.
That the black theaters do not get the public subsidy that the white theaters get.
Now, this is at the Castillo Theater on Theater Row, on the far west part of 42nd Street, which has a number of theaters,
Yes.
off Broadway theaters have cropped up there, and also over near Union Square.
Oh, yes.
What impact have these small theaters, where the tickets, you can get a ticket for $25 as opposed to $300? What impact have they had on the theater and on opportunities for actors?
Well, I think they've given opportunities to actors. I think they've increased our audience. And it's interesting that you talk about Woody King, the New Federal Theater, which is located really on the Lower East Side, though it no longer has a home of its own. He goes to different places. But he comes from, he came from Detroit, but he comes from the black theater community. I happen to be on the board of theater for the New City, which is on the Lower East Side. There, a woman, Crystal Field, has done a great deal to embrace new playwrights, to open up the theater to the community as a whole with cheap tickets, to also attract young playwrights and give them a platform. I'm involved, interestingly enough, at this particular point, with Judith Molina of the famed Living Theater, which is now located on the Lower East Side. And there again, we have an experimental theater group with the idea of enriching the community by bringing it plays of significance. With Living Theater, not so much black theater, but theaters with political content. Actors Equity gave me their Paul Robeson Award, and I've received many awards. I just received a proclamation from the Bill Perkins in the state
Wow.
Senate, along with Ruby Dee and Carmen de
Well,
Lavallade.
congratulations.
Yes.
You're going to have to come back and we'll talk about all of your political activism. But, you know, it's been a pleasure, you know, talking to you about a very extraordinary life in the theater.
Which
you
is
know,
not yet over.
Which is exactly, we certainly hope not, and that has spanned such interesting times. And I look forward to coming to see you again in your next play. I want to thank Vinie Burrows for joining me today. For the City University of New York and 1-to-1, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.